Thank you very, very much for joining us.
It's great to be here, and congratulations, Vintage, on your 20th anniversary. Fabulous.
Thank you. Let's start from somewhere in the beginning. I don't know if there is a bigger compliment than that, but upon your retirement from American Express, Warren Buffett, the company's largest shareholder, stated, "Ken's been the gold standard for corporate leadership and the benchmark that I measure others against." Again, kind of extraordinary. What were your defining moments at American Express that influenced your career trajectory and leadership style?
I think my defining moments, I'll start with an early moment, but then talk about the moments when I was CEO. I guess one of the most important developmental moves for me was taking over a business when I was 31 years old that was really not doing well in the company.
That's at the beginning of your career.
That was at the beginning of my career, and it was selling merchandise through the mail. So this is pre-internet. What was fascinating about this business is I had to learn very quickly how to put a strategy together and to galvanize an organization, and also how to take risks. And one of the things I believe from a leadership standpoint is you've got to figure out pretty quickly, not just what the strategy of your business is, but what's the mission of the business? What are the values of the business? And then how do you increase the speed that you can operate in as an organization? And the great thing of the opportunity for me was I was told at that time by Lou Gerstner, who was head of the largest division at American Express, that if we did not show some progress, he was going to close the business down in 6 months. So that
actually... It was a losing business when you started, right?
It was bad business, it was losing money, and what we were able to do as a collective group was literally in a year, we turned profitable, but in a 3-year period, we went from $100 million in sales to $800 million in sales. That was a defining moment for me. That sort of put me on the map. But let me, Asaf, move to my first year as CEO at American Express. I would say what was a defining moment for me, and I really do believe that in crises, character is defined. And also, you either are able to get the people with you or you lose them. And so 9/11 for me was a defining moment. I don't need to go through the terror, but I think clearly what has happened in Israel with Hamas is a reason why I think any type of terrorism I condemn, and we all have seen the horrific acts that were perpetrated. And for 9/11, we lost 11 of our colleagues who were in the North Tower. And the emotional grief was very significant, that almost every employee had a family, a friend that had been impacted by 9/11. And so what happened at American Express is we had a very dispirited employee base because we were right across the street from the World Trade Center. We'd lost 11 of our colleagues. People had lost family and friends. Our business dropped precipitously. So we saw card billings drop over 50% in a matter of days. And people were really questioning whether American Express would be able to survive. And I was in Salt Lake City when the attack occurred. And I actually had the TV on in my room in the morning, and I saw the plane hit. Obviously, it was a delay. So the plane hit, but I was on the call with some of my colleagues in New York, and obviously heard the screams. And then there was dead silence. And at that moment, I really was initially unsure what I would do. And I said, well, what are my priorities? First priority was the employees at the company, their safety. I did not know at the time that we had employees, families, and employees that had been killed. And so I was able to contact our head of security. I asked him to account for our employees all over the world. I then said, we need to also figure out how we can help our customers who are traveling around the world. Now, what was important is I couldn't reach the head of operations. And what's very important about a culture and values in the company that I'm most proud about is that our employees sprung to action. They started operating and working to help customers, not only, frankly, American Express customers, but anyone who was calling in for help, which was really important. Second thing I did, which was a very practical thing, is I said, we're probably not going to be able to go back to our building. And so I looked for real estate in the tri-state area. It took me 2 days to come back because the US government wasn't allowing people to fly. And so I got back around 6 in the morning. I went into a location in Hoboken because we couldn't go back to our building because the first 11 floors of the building were substantially damaged. And I remember getting on a desk and talking to around 300 employees that had come in the morning and told them that our priority was them, that even though the company had suffered a great deal, I was confident that the company would be able to come back.
Would you mind if I quote to you what you said? I remember, I saw this and maybe a little bit emotional, but you said what I saw, you said, our company is sound, our hearts are even stronger, and our minds will get clearer. We will overcome. And then, in my mind, I changed it with company and country.
Yes.
So maybe just on that, what would be your advice for today's CEOs that are going through change, both in the tech market and also the geopolitical, and you guys are also kind of significant investors in few Israeli companies, so maybe a little bit about, investment in Israel in this environment.
Yeah, what I would first say is a day after the attack, actually in the morning, I think Adam Volkin is here. Adam, David Fialco, Joel Cutler, Hamant Taneja, leaders of the firm, what we felt very strongly is we wanted to issue a very strong statement condemning the attack.
On October 7th.
On October 7th, and saying that we stood with Israel. And I think what's important is that the moral clarity in a crisis is you've got to be clear about where you stand. And I think it was very important that General Catalyst took a stand, because one of the things that we believe in fundamentally is that the values, the human values of the firm, we can't stay silent. So I think it was important that we got our message out immediately. But what I would also say is that what's critical in this crisis is it's very important from a leadership standpoint to give context. And what I found in 9/11 is the need to constantly communicate. One, to let people know not only where the company stood, not only making the condemnation, but also understanding what the families at the companies are going through and what's the support that we can give to them. So to be very, very clear is the first priority should be people at the companies and their families and the impact on the families. Second priority should be how are we going to operate in this environment? What's the uncertainty that we're dealing with in this environment? And to be clear about and realistic about what the impacts will be. And some of those impacts are going to be negative on the business.
Yep.
But then I think you've got to articulate what's the pathway forward. What are some of the tactics and the strategies in the short term, as well as the moderate and long term, that you're going to put in place? And I actually think in our role as leaders, in a crisis, there's a pastoral element to our leadership. People need to see that you get it, that you understand the emotion that people are going through, but at the same time, they have to see some confidence in you that there's a pathway forward. And what I found is literally in 9/11, every day, in some way, shape, or form, employees around the world heard from me. And I would talk about how I was feeling. What were some of the emotions I was going through? And then here are things I was doing today. So they could see that there's a path forward by the actions I was taking on my daily basis. And then I would tell stories about what was happening around the company to move us forward.
Cool. Maybe shift gears, and the title of our discussion is actually FinTech and AI. So we've talked about the cycle we're at now. You guys are obviously the big investors in a few of the leading companies in FinTech like Strike, Ramp, and Rapid.
Right.
So I want to ask you two questions on that. One is, where do you see FinTech? Where do you guys spend your time on FinTech? And then also the application of AI now in general. And we can then maybe segue that to social responsibility in AI.
Sure.
in general.
So what I would say is that artificial intelligence, but particularly AGI, I think is an absolute game changer. And I think relative to the internet, relative to the industrial revolution. I think the change is going to be massive. As I look at FinTech and I look at AGI, one place I would start is, and it's an area that we're focused on, is trust. Because I think what's going to be very important in all of our investments is in our financial system. Our financial system needs trust. And as we look at our companies, but particularly in FinTech, companies that really are focused on building that trust is critical. Now, if I look at specifics, I think the level of personalization that can be done in payments is significant. And that's an area that we are investing in, to your point, that we see very strong opportunities. I also think there is low-hanging fruit in a number of processes. So if I look at auditing, I think there are opportunities there. As I look at purchasing, there are a range of opportunities there. And so literally, for me in fintech, if you step back, there really have only been a handful of companies that have achieved very significant scale. And I think we're now in a time period where with AGI, I think there's the opportunity to create companies of very significant scale.
Just being very cognizant of the time.
Yep.
You've been very kind of vocal on your legacy with impact and diversity. In your approach to investing and guiding companies, you always emphasize the concept of responsible innovation, and I've heard you talk about like why corporations are here because of the society. Can you share more about what the initiative you have co-founded with Ken Frazier, 110, sorry, and what would you like to achieve with that globally? Yep.
Yeah, let me just say one sort of overriding, and then I'll hit 110 very quickly. I think what I fundamentally believe is corporations exist because society allows us to exist. So we have some responsibilities to society. So that's an overarching mantra for me. What 110 is, very simply, is I believe one of the reasons for the political divisions in the United States and in other countries is that people feel left out. And if we look at particularly individuals who did not go to college, they feel helpless. And so after the murder of George Floyd, Ken Frazier and I, the day after, were saying, what is it that we could do that could really make more of a fundamental difference? And what we decided was we would focus on jobs, and we would focus on job categories that did not require a 4-year college education. We since have expanded. It was initially targeted to blacks. Now we've opened it up to everyone. And the purpose of it is companies, and this is one of the, in my view, crazy things, close to 65% of jobs in Fortune 500 companies require a 4-year college degree. When you actually examine the job, it does not require a 4-year college degree. And so what I
would even argue maybe VC doesn't.
That's right, absolutely, absolutely. And so the reality is, what I really feel very strongly about is we have to give training and reskilling to people. We also have to position blue-collar jobs in a more respectful way. Because particularly in US society, people look down on someone who did not go to college. And so part of what we've been able to do is to get, now we have 70 Fortune 100 companies that have signed on. They've made a 10-year commitment to jobs, and they've made a 10-year financial commitment. And we focus that money on training, development, reskilling, but we also get companies to change the specs for the jobs. And so this is something that I feel really strongly about. It was an effort that we thought was really important. And then when we frankly stepped back after 6 months, we said we should open this up really to everyone, because if a company's going to change their specs, they're going to change the specs for everyone. And I think this is a win-win. This is one of those win-win opportunities.
Time ran out. We probably could stay here for a longer time. I want to thank Ken for taking the time coming to here. And again, thank you everybody for joining us.
Good, thank you.
Thanks so much.